When I'm filming this, the results of the local and regional elections are still being counted. But even before the election, you could feel the disappointment of Brexit supporters in many places. In Wakefield, for example, a majority of 66.3% voted in favour of Britain leaving the EU in 2016. In December 2019, most of the 300,000 inhabitants of the former industrial city voted for the Conservatives, so that Johnson would go through with Brexit against resistance in the London Parliament. The hopes that voters there in the north of England pinned on Brexit were high. Towns like Wakefield had suffered greatly from the mine closures of Margaret Thatcher's time and the decline of heavy industry. Thatcher had also centralized regional economic and budgetary policy in London, which in the long run led to the economic neglect of the northern regions. And the consequences were poor education, high unemployment, and increased dependence on social assistance. Some areas of Wakefield are among the poorest residential areas in Britain. A quarter of the city's workers are paid less than the UK living wage of the equivalent of €11 an hour. With Brexit, people hoped Johnson's promises would become a reality. Fewer immigrants, more work for the hard-working people, the working class, and more support for London through investment, the so-called programme of levelling up. But haven't the bills of the voters risen since then? State-of-the-art office buildings stand opposite the train station, and a newly designed shopping street runs through the city centre, and the modern museum named after the sculptor Barbara Hepworth also attracts visitors to Wakefield today. The town hall from the Gründerzeit reveals the former wealth of the city barons from the textile industry and from mining. But abandoned bars and closed shops bear witness to the difficult months of the corona pandemic. And the grim reality of the city is on the other side of the embankment. Walls as high as a house with numerous cameras on them enclose Great Britain's largest high security prison. Crime in the city is high and drugs are a constant problem. Immigrants are washing cars on the street, one kebab shop is lined up after the other. The settlements of the smallest terraced houses from the mining era begin a little further on there. Someone called Ian is cutting rhubarb in one of the allotment gardens, and he is afraid that he will be quoted publicly with his opinion, so he does not want to give his full name to the newspapers asking. His father fought in the submarine fleet in the Mediterranean during World War II and worked in the textile industry after the war. The family traditionally voted Labour. Ian is bitter, having lost his beloved job doing conservation work for British museums to austerity measures. And he once travelled all over the world for the British Museum. Now all he has left is his allotment. He has turned his back on the Labour Party then. He says their policies are too soft on immigrants and people who live on welfare. And that's why he voted for Brexit and elected Boris Johnson in 2019. He forgives the Prime Minister for the scandals and parties in Downing Street. He wants to vote for the Tories again in the local elections, or he did so. Johnson has not kept the promises he made to lure voters. Brexit is done in their eyes, but immigration, especially of refugees, is increasing. Last year, 3 times as many migrants crossed the English Channel in boats than the previous year. And right-wing populists like Nigel Farage exploit the issue in the media every day. Soaring energy and food prices have created a new level of poverty in Wakefield. There are several food banks in the city where volunteers hand out groceries and baby milk and help those in need to apply for government support. Many families cannot make ends meet even when they work, because with the 0-hour contracts, they only receive the hourly minimum wage of £9.50 when called by the employer. People can't even say what Brexit brought them. It was just important to people that their voices were heard and that Brexit went through. Labour policy on immigration is also too soft in their eye. The anger at the economic refugees in the city is great. And nationally, Labour is ahead of the Conservative Party with 33% in polls on general voting behaviour. But there, in the working class neighbourhoods, Labour leader Keir Starmer is not very popular. The former public prosecutor comes across as too technocratic and isn't the type of body who might do better there. And Chris Walsh, for example, is a rugby player and proud of his Irish mining heritage. Labour no longer represents us workers, and the Conservatives promise everything and do nothing. Boris Johnson is far too fickle. That's his verdict. Walsh is proud of his gym, which he built during the pandemic, despite all the lockdowns. Walsh trains with young people who have gone astray and who the police put him in touch with. They learn how to vent themselves while boxing. Walsh feels sorry for the working class population, which can hardly afford anything anymore. There are enough jobs here at Coca-Cola and Haribo, but most people only make minimum wage. The politicians from London don't know what it means to make ends meet. They don't even know how valuable a pound is. The state must pay more, help more, but he only saves instead, he says. That's where it gets personal for Walsh too. He has a disabled son because there weren't enough midwives in the delivery room when the son was born, and the women didn't recognize the child's dangerous meningitis in time, he says. The midwives later cried just like his wife. UK voters have not forgotten the draconian austerity measures the Conservative Party enacted when they took office in 2010. Now there's great fear that the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, will again save too much and forget the fate of the financial weaker. In his political fervour, Walsh has joined the Reform Party, the former UKIP party of right-wing populist Nigel Farage, and stood as a candidate in the local elections. However, he cannot say exactly what this party should change. He knows that given the majority voting systems in Great Britain, they would anyway have little chance of ever getting into the London Parliament. So, wasted votes. But Walsh is still enthusiastic. The young generation in Wakefield is no longer enthusiastic, has alienated itself from politics, perhaps also because of the corona pandemic. Politics doesn't do us any good anymore, he says. The parties are all about the same. They hardly differ. They don't make any difference to us. And that was said by Ruth, that's a young employee at a car company there. The politicians promise everything to come to power. Then nothing happens. That's why we no longer go to the polls. Politics has become meaningless for us, she says. And that is the real danger here. In times of social media, where people get tons of information every day, you have seen that the younger generation, that's mostly on social media, is the one that is getting less and less of the really important information, of what they need to make decisions, of what they need to really get the full picture. And that's a big issue. And you can see this with political channels on YouTube. If you know one real political channel that has millions of subscribers, let me know. I haven't found one ever. And I don't mean just news that are spread over from TV. I mean a proper politics channel with millions of subscribers. Please surprise me. Because too few people, especially with the younger viewers, are not interested. They don't care because it's complicated to really get a full picture there. You get tons of other information and headlines too easily via social media, and that is a big problem nowadays. And if anyone knows a solution for this, not just saying, we need more education in school about this. If I didn't want to hear things in school, I didn't properly listen, and I had good grades in school, just saying. But they couldn't tell me everything there. So it is a very hard thing to find a solution to get these information to people. We have a lot of easy access stuff nowadays. We've got a lot of participation here in my city, and people are not using it because they're not getting the information, because they don't want to get those complicated information. And that's the real problem. We are giving people the chance to participate big time, and they don't. Or they even don't know how to do it because they don't want to get this information, and that's a big problem. And that's why I was babbling about this for quite some time, but it is one of the most serious problems of our times. And I'm saying this in a time of war. But there's the danger of much worse in the future if it stays the way it is. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.